So for those of you I haven't met, my name is Marie. I'm the CEO and founder of the C Collective, and we are a user experience and marketing consultancy helping sustainable startup and innovation scale with better user experiences. Okay. If you want to also share your background and where you're coming from and your expectations, you can do that in the chat if you haven't yet done so. Right. So just a few words about what we do at the C Collective. So we help from anything from strategy and user research down to user-centered design. So designing experiences and touch points such as marketing strategies, websites, applications, and also communication strategies. We also help on implementation support, so helping you build the products that we've designed, but also the underlying business processes that can make them happen, basically. And we also have a training and mentoring activity around user experience, design thinking, and marketing. And we also organize once a year some design thinking led hackathons, and the last one was about women and impact investments. I know some of the participants are here, so I just want to say hello to them. So why am I here? My background. So in a few words, I'm here because I really believe in the power of user experience to mainstream sustainable products and services. And I want you to help with this kind of toolbox so that you can also scale your solutions. So I spent a lot of my career working with big organizations in the tech field on anything from marketing to user experience and sales. I also happen to be a circular economy consultant, and I really founded the collective to focus on helping companies with a regenerative model and a positive social and environmental impact. So just a reminder for those who haven't introduced themselves, you can do that through the Teams chat. So what are we going to cover today? First, we're going to look into the challenges and the opportunities of marketing and growing sustainable innovation. We'll look into the barriers to sustainable consumption and in the light of behavioral science. And then we'll dive into what user experience is about, the toolbox, and why it's so powerful. And I'll share some best practices, and at the end we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A from you guys. So what are the challenges and opportunities of marketing sustainable innovation? The first thing I always talk about, and this is top on our website, is the attitude behavioral gap that we have in sustainable consumption. Basically, overall in Europe, we have over 70% or even more, consumers that when they are asked, they say they are concerned by global warming, loss of biodiversity, and all the environmental and social issues. So overall, very positive attitudes. But then when we look at the reality, which is the market shares of these products and services, we are looking at single digits. So for instance, I always quiz people on do you know what the market share of organic products in the UK is? So we haven't got the stats from last year, but if you could just through the chat give me some figures to see how close you are. Ella, do we have some figures coming up in the chat? Right, everybody's on mute. Well, so the reality is we're looking at 1.6%, so it's probably less than what people would expect. It's growing every year, but not that much. And if we look at another category of products, like the alternative fuel vehicles, it's also below 10% for 2019. So we're not there yet, basically. there's a huge gap between what people say and what people do, and how they spend their money, how they behave, basically. And this is why we're here, to bridge that gap by scaling your solutions, okay, and really changing behaviors. So why is this gap so big? Well, the first explanation that we like to talk about are based on human sciences, and the first one is around evolutionary psychology. Basically, your biased daily behaviors, they are rooted in our genes. So unfortunately, hopefully it's not destiny, but it's still something that you have to factor in. So the first one of those sort of ancestral forces at play is the self-interest. So we're always looking to cater for our needs first. Also short-termism, I don't have to explain, I think. The disregard of risks that you can't see because they are far off in time or just not immediately visible to you. And of course, social limitation, and last but not least, status. Status also still plays a huge role in how we behave and how we consume as well. Of course, this is not, destiny, or culture, or family also shape how we behave, but it's important to have that in mind because it's still there. Beyond evolutionary psychology, there's also lots of insight from behavioral psychology and economics. So I think the first bit, and I'm just gonna check, I think somebody just entered the room. Yes, I'm gonna check that. So I was talking about behavioral psychology. So the first thing to really understand and how to keep in mind is that people are just far from being rational, and especially when it comes to tackling social and environmental challenge, globally and at the individual level, okay? So there's a really interesting book, which is called What We Think About When We Try Not to Think About Global Warming, that was published probably 5 or 10 years ago. But it highlights 5 barriers that sort of prevent the climate message to really tick and translate into action for people. So it's distance, doom, cognitive dissonance, denial, and identity. And I'll give you a bit more details on these. Is similar to the the risk you can't see aspect of evolutionary psychology. It's the fact that problems feel remote because we can't see them, as they are far off either in space or in time, or both. Okay, so when we always talk about what's happening in on the pole, it doesn't really click with us. Sorry, can you all mute yourself if you don't mind? I'm hearing some background noise. The second one is doom. So there's a lot of negative framing around climate change in the media. It's around cost, loss, sacrifice, and it's just no matter how real it is, it just often creates a need to simply avoid the topics. So people feel helpless, and this kind of fear message backfires into inaction. The other aspect is cognitive dissonance. So it applies to lots of different situations, but basically is what happens when what we know conflicts with what we do. And then you have this kind of dissonance that sets in so that we can feel better about how we live. So it's kind of a mental gymnastics to align our conscience with our actions, basically. So it's like when we say, my grandmother smoked all her life and she lived until 95, so why can't I smoke? Another one is identity. So basically we filter news and information through our own professional, political, or cultural identity, or a mix of all of them. And we look for information that is going to confirm our existing values and notions. So this is why we may filter out facts that are just not in line with that and are challenging our identity. And this is a good example, you know, in the increasing polarization of the climate issue in US politics, but it also applies to lots of other countries, basically. So what's the user experience opportunity? How do we use that toolbox, that discipline to overcome those barriers? So the first question I have for you is, you know, what is user experience for you? And I'd like you guys to share in a few words your definition in the chat. All right, don't be shy. So what are the words that you associate with user experience, basically? And maybe, so I know there's quite a few UX designers or service designers there. Maybe they can not answer that question and leave people that are less savvy on this topic. Okay. Customer journey, yeah. Empathy, really good. Consistency, yeah. Users driven by time management, quality and trust. Okay, anything else? Any other thoughts? All right, so I'll share our definition. But before that, I want to quiz you on another thing, which is, what is for you the currency of user experience? And it's one word, maybe. So has anybody got some thoughts around this? Inspiring acting, web design, responsiveness, retention. Okay, that's yeah, that's good. Ah, Kana, you're a star. That's exactly, maybe you've been on this training before, but that's exactly it. Thanks, Kana, for making my job easy. So it's all about emotions, and this is why we call it the currency, whether they're negative or positive. This is what we are, you know, exchanging in the relationship between a brand and its users. So what's our definition? So at the C Collective, we define user experience as a broad concept, which is the product of a sequence of interactions between an organization and its users, and it happens so over time and also across different channels. So it's really about how you make your prospect, customer, all your users experience your brands across all of its facets, and also how you make them feel, okay, by triggering those positive or negative emotions. And as a concept and a discipline, it applies to lots of different types of users. So prospects, users, whether they are paying or not, customers in the B2B, B2C spaces, but also your employees, investors, and also other stakeholders, such as people you need to influence, or people you need to partner with. So it's a very broad spectrum of stakeholders that we can deal with user experience toolbox. The one question we often get is, how do you join the dots between marketing and user or customer experience? So basically, we see user experience as the new marketing. So we think that entrepreneurs or B2B, B2C marketers, they really need to embrace this shift of paradigm, from promoting products and services to building experiences that are built, designed around the user's needs and motivation. So, and this is how we achieve this, through user-centered design. We as brand have to create those positive feelings to emotionally connect with the users. So that's the job of user experience, basically. This is just an example between designing the product and designing the experience. So what does it take to create a good user experience strategy, basically? First, it's about understanding the needs of users all along the buying journey. So some of you mentioned that in the when I was quizzing you about the definition. So understanding what happens at each stage and defining what needs to be done to improve that, during each stage and also across the different channels, because this is never going to be a simple linear journey. Okay, so what's also quite important is to start understanding that your experience is being built, even before people actually reach your website, for instance. So they say that 50 to 60% of the buying journey is done when people get this first engagement with a branch touch point, whether it's your website or your salespeople. So that's why things like branding, storytelling are an integral part of your experience strategy, basically. And similarly, it's super important and offers a lot of ROI to look at, client success programs, how you onboard clients so that they become super happy and become advocates and give you free referrals at the other end of the journey. So basically, the goal is to create a, instead of a linear journey, almost like a circle, a virtuous cycle where you have a low customer acquisition cost because you have very efficient marketing and conversion, and then your clients are super happy and they become advocates of your business and give you some free leads. So this is the holy grail of growth, and this is through a continuous improvement of your end-to-end user journey, basically. In terms of the link between customer experience and profitability and performance at business level, so there's been a lot of research in that field, and more than 5 years ago, Gartner was saying that customer experience was the new competitive battlefield. And this happens because what we see is that the traditional differentiators, which are price and quality, have kind of lost their relevance because customer power is growing, their expectations are also growing, and they compare everything, and they also have shaped expectations shaped by some market leaders and disruptors, so the likes of Airbnb, Deliveroo, Apple, that have got these amazing end-to-end user experiences. So that's what people expect, basically. And so user experience has become a great way to differentiate, and it's not easy to reproduce a great user experience. And it's also become an amazing factor for overall business performance, basically. So looking back at the barriers that we discussed to climate action, we can see that outstanding user experiences offers a lot of opportunities to overcome them. So for instance, if we look at the distance, by your storytelling, by your storytelling, you can make the issues that you or the problems that you're trying to solve feel near and personal to your audience. So for instance, these are just a couple of examples. So if you talk about things that really connect with your users' pain points, you're going to be much more efficient at attracting attention and getting people to do whatever you want them to do. The other aspect is on cognitive dissonance. So if you make things super easy, just a few clicks away, you're going to convert way more good intentions into action. And a very good example is making, the green choice a default choice. And again, just one click away. And this is an example from an airline checkout page. So how do we design those great user experiences? So there's a whole toolbox. So I won't cover in detail everything. Sorry for the user experience designers out there, you already know a lot of this. But basically, today we'll speak about user research, the key elements, so the key tools in there, and also information architecture, wireframes, prototyping and testing. So the kind of different stages of a user experience assignment. So in terms of user research, again, there are lots, there are stages and methods to achieve this, from preparing your research to running your research and analyzing everything. So the key elements is that we focus a lot in user experience, in qualitative research, doing things like observation, ethnography, and just talking to people. So talking to your users, talking to prospective users, to partners and other stakeholders. So once we've collected this qualitative insight, which can be refined also by more quantitative processes such as online surveys, we wrap this up into some actionable outputs, which are user personas and user journey mapping. So personas are super useful. So they can be called profiles as well, or archetypes. It doesn't really matter, but it's just a very simple way to map the needs, goals, and motivations of your users, so that everybody in your business can put themselves in the shoes of the users. That's the first benefit. And also that gives you a very simple framework for defining whatever your product or service needs to achieve. Okay, so when, for instance, we design a lot of websites, and we always build user personas so that we can have a persona-based navigation in the website, so that no matter if you're an investor in a clean tech business, or if you're a B2C or B2B potential buyer, you have a place and a specific content that you can find easily to get on with your job and whatever you want to know from that website. Okay, so personas are super helpful. If you don't have one set of personas, I really encourage you to get some done for your business. User journeys. So user journeys are covering the path from discovery of a need throughout finding solutions to fulfill it. So they are time-based and also across different channels potentially. And they capture user insights, they capture emotions usually, and really good way to visualize what's happening, where are the problems, where are you losing your audience, where are people dropping off, and what are the opportunities. So really great collaboration tool to work on anything from your marketing strategy to your website, your customer success programs. So super useful. And this is an example in the home improvement market that we did for the client. So the next stage, know that you've done some good foundation work with your research. The next stage is designing. So designing the solution. So this is where you're going to be looking at your existing user journeys and trying to think collaboratively with your team, what the future your journeys need to be. Okay, so you're going to map them, and then you can start looking at changing websites or business processes, and then the final stage is going to be testing. So this is an experience map, which is a bit of an extension of your user journey, which goes, from A to Z in terms of buying journey stages. So from raising interest down to getting referrals. It's really a good helicopter view that you build for each persona across all the relevant channels and touch points. So really helps you identify in a holistic way and resource efficient way what you need to do all across the business to attract users, to convert them into happy customers. And it's a very interesting collaboration tool so that everybody in the business can put themselves in the shoes of the users and Also acknowledge, that this kind of myth of love at first sight doesn't really happen, that you have to have a series of touches and interactions with a prospect before they actually come and speak to you, or convert into a client. So usually for things like simple IT products such as TV, laptops, you need at least 3 touch points before the sale happens. But if you look at other more complex technology or services categories, you need usually 8 to 12 touches before a sale happens. Okay, so there's a long journey, and it's never continuous as well. And so if you look at what needs to happen also at the backstage level, mapping your end-to-end experience is also a super efficient way to look at what tools and processes needs to be there to support your desired experience. So you can look at what is the kind of content, set of stories that you need to put together. Of course, what is the website that you need? What are the technologies, your marketing stack? How do you automate your marketing? How do you have a good CRM integration so that the leads you are generating are being followed up properly by the sales team? And further down the line, how can you structure onboarding or client success processes so that the hard-earned clients are delighted by your service, making the most of it, and become advocates? And the last bit is, how do you make sure that you are maximizing the impact of happy clients by getting referrals from them? So it's super important to strategize the referrals, because they don't happen that naturally, basically. So if you ask people nicely, they will give you referrals, but if you don't, it's less likely to happen. Another tool that we use for website design is information architecture. So basically, it helps structure a website and have different levels of content. So it's always going to be the first step that we take to design an application, so a mobile application or a new website. It's super important, and you don't need to go into design consideration for that. It's more, how do you organize your content, basically. Next stage as well in a typical website project design or redesign are wireframes. So basically, it's the skeleton of how your information will be positioned on each page with different modules. And this is usually, so the wireframes are usually like low fidelity, black and white, and really they need to happen before you go into the the colors and the visual design to be super focused and super structured. So think about if you were building a house, you would first nail down the floor plan, the doors, the windows, and so on, before you actually think about the interior design, the colors, the furniture, and so on. So that's the same. Wireframes should come before visual design. So in a nutshell, great user experience is really about more emotions, less friction, and really empowering users to find quick solutions and continue with their everyday lives. Okay, so to make it happen, what you really need to have is a dedicated focus and investment across the business, and sponsored by the management. You need to have that strong user insight as a foundation of your project, basically, and be able to really move away from assumptions and intuition. So research really helps backing everything that you think is true for your users, backed by some factual feedback. So this is where testing is also super important at different stages in your project. Employee experience is also super important and is a key part in the overall experience equation. Okay, so you can't deliver a top-notch customer experience if your employees are unhappy or not trained, not empowered to do it. In terms of priorities, I'd say focus, if you're an existing business, focus on avoiding friction or dealing with unhappy customers first, because they are 10 times more vocal than the happy ones, unfortunately. And then also I say use try and tested modular solutions such as website builders, marketing automation, and off-the-shelf tools before you think about building everything from scratch. And again, start small, test and learn. So that's it for the toolbox. I mean, obviously I'll send you this presentation and I have lots of sources where you can find out more about all these tools and methods. I just want to end this with some best practices that we've seen in our projects and might be inspirational for you guys. So the first one is really, we know a lot of you don't have a product or a service yet, but it's okay. So what is really critical, especially when you need to get your first customers and get some investment, is really to try and bring to life your product in the best possible way. And even if it's not live yet. So a prototype, a good story, a good animation can bring those powerful emotions that you need to engage, initial pilot clients and investors. And this is a really good one from a business called Skyroom, who builds sustainable homes for key workers in London. So they've got a beautiful website with some high level, high fidelity videos of what their homes could look like, but they haven't built any. So it's a really good example. The other thing, I was mentioning that if you're on a budget and if you're not aiming to be the next Amazon and a huge e-commerce business, I would strongly advise you to look at using website builders, themes and templates, things like Shopify as well, Squarespace, Wix, to build your touch points because they have a fantastic time to market. They are cheap to use, and also they are tried and tested in terms of UX. So basically, if you had to do the same, output, it usually takes a lot more time and money than to use a carefully selected template, basically. And most of these solutions also offer quite enough customization for the end product to be really good in terms of UX. Next one is really less is more. So basically you have under 10 seconds or less to convince your website visitors. So be super efficient, get your value proposition across at the top of the homepage or landing page. Even think about your audience visiting you on a mobile site versus a desktop site. So you have even less real estate space to attract them. The other aspect is user journeys are always interrupted. So you need to fix the leaks and find ways to re-engage users, okay? There's always going to be, someone interrupting somebody on their journey for several reasons. And so very good best practices come from the e-commerce sector with the abandoned shopping cart recovery strategies. So they help boost sales by up to 40%. And this is something that you can get inspiration from, even if you're not into e-commerce, basically. Similarly, retargeting ad banners are very useful really get. So we have to be mindful that they're only going to be, you know, a part of the equation when choosing your product, and you have to make them, you know, more as tangible as possible. Tons of CO2 are really not something that people connect with there, and so if you can translate that into, you know, trees or avoided cars, you know, cars off the road, that's much more efficient than the CO2 figure, basically. And the same goes with a lot of benefits that you would have to translate. Another one is onboarding and referral programs. So let's not assume that these things happen naturally. They have to be, you know, crafted as processes, and as and also you have to train your teams to make them happen. Okay, so I think I mentioned that before for the referral programs. If you ask your clients in a nice way, in a systematic way, you'll get way more referrals than if you just wait there and for them to happen naturally. Okay, so these are some practices we've seen and experienced. There's way more. So that's it for me. I'll take some of your questions if you have any. I'm losing my voice. Any questions on the methods, on the best practices?
Yes.
Yes, Julie?
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Great presentation.
Great presentation.
So just if you could go back to the slide on the personas, just to
Personas, yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit more of a definition on that, because that's a new term for me.
Yeah, so personas are sort of archetypes of your hypothetical users. I don't know if this definition is actually making these things clearer, but they're you know, they're representation of your users. So usually we put together for a simple business 3 to 5 personas maximum, and they represent your users and who you need to design for, basically, at the end of the day. So you would have personas for your direct end users, but you could also add personas for investors and potential partners. Does that help? So it's different from segment. Let's say segmentation is kind of the old way to break down your market, and it's highly reliant on demographics, so socio-demo criteria, where personas are really around needs, goals, motivations with regards to your business and what you're trying to achieve.
So that's different from business canvas map.
Yes, well, I'd say that if you look at the business canvas,
yeah,
almost like the personas could be one part of this business canvas.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Julie.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
I am most curious how you convince businesses, particularly businesses with tight budgets like startups, to actually do that research before they jump into their website project. We really struggle with explaining the value of doing the research in the beginning. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I'm not saying it's an easy one. What's your business? What do you do?
We build websites for nonprofits and small mission-driven businesses, and so we're a small consulting firm, and we typically work with businesses that have, you know, not huge budgets.
So, and of course, the businesses we speak to are also on a very low budget, so they are bootstrapping everything. But I think first let's be realistic. There's a lot of this research that, or bits of this research that's already been done, you know, in some way by the founders. They know a lot of things about their users, but they haven't necessarily, you know, crystallized that into an actionable tool such as user personas, and it's somewhere in their head. So we help them do that by, you know, interviewing them as part of stakeholders interviews. And then we try to do this in a very pragmatic and simple way. So it doesn't take days. Well, it takes a few days, but you don't need to interview 30 people to get some user persona. First, you can have some draft personas that are created, you know, based on a workshop with the client, you know, extracting whatever they have in their head and using your common sense. And then you interview maybe 2 or 3 people fitting that description of persona to validate what you have in there. Maybe reshuffle the personas, but have some, you know, some factual insights to back this key element of your, you know, your website, of your value proposition, because it's not only for the website, it's for your entire value proposition, your messaging, that this is going to be useful. And usually there's, even if people are a bit like, not sure it's worth the investment, usually the insight we get from just speaking to 10 people is huge. And it's always eye-opening for the management, and it also creates some opportunities and ideas for, you know, marketing, stories, thought leadership as well, on top of making your service a bit more grounded in insight. So that's, you know, that's the kind of value we have to sell to founders. And the other thing is, you know, the people you speak to are going to be also kind of very friendly to you in the future, and also can be used to do some testing. So usually when we do a user interview, at the end we say, oh, by the way, you're a very nice person. Could you also spend, you know, 20 minutes in the next month or so to help us with the website? And we ask them again to feedback on the product or the website that we're building. So it's not necessarily an easy one, but yeah, we're not talking about crazy budgets either. You know, you can do good research with, you know, 5 to 10K basically. Any other questions? Thoughts on multi-language practice for international businesses? So Ken, I think Google Translate does a pretty good job, but so building multilingual. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of background noise. You could mute yourself. I'm trying to answer that question. So multilingual digital touch points at our website are not an easy one. There are solutions, but they don't work perfectly, in the sense that there's always a bit of a manual touch to add to this. So translation is one thing, but what you need is localization basically. And the localization is about this cultural fit, but it's also around, it's also going to be based on your on the language your user personas speak. Okay, so you have to, yeah, you have to speak the language of your audience. So there's a cultural, there's a language aspect, and there's a sectoral aspect as well. Hope it helps. So completely different looking site per language. Yeah, so I think there's really good ways, and for instance, WordPress has some multilingual capabilities to do one website with the 2 or 3 languages, and I would probably encourage you to start from there, unless you have a lot of budget to build and maintain different sites. But it's, yeah, I think it's more, it's not so much about the layout, it's more about the content and adapting the messaging to your audience basically. Do you guys have any other questions? Yes, no? I'm just going through the chat. Bye, Chaley.
I'll ask another
Decide
question.
what content to show. And I'll take your, Julie, I'll take your question.
If there's nobody else asking a question, then I'll ask another one.
Okay. User agreements, one example that we need user to read thousands of lines before agreeing. So I guess the which content to show, this is down to the, the information architecture first. So you organize your whatever, document or a website hierarchy of content first. And then you go down to page level. So you create a template, for instance, for your homepage, and this is where you are going to start. And this is where I was saying, this 10-second rule, you have to convince in 10 seconds. Otherwise, there's not going to be a second date. So you have to be super efficient with your words and, having the right visual supporting your copy. But this is where you have to really spend some time articulating and validating your key value proposition, okay? Because this is something that needs to come across on the first the first bit that people are going to see in just a few seconds.
Oh, Adit ya? Sini kok ada Jun? Oh, Jun
sorry, there's somebody talking, having a side conversation. Julie, what was your question?
Hi, John.
Yeah. Yeah, Debbie, I've muted Debbie. I found her.
That's okay.
Julie.
Sorry. Slide 3 or 4, when you first started, you gave a stat on 1.6% pertaining to behavior gaps. Was that Europe-based or global-based?
So I'll show you the slide in question. So that was the UK market share of organic products in the food and drink market.
Okay.
So I was just to, reinforce the fact that this is such a very tiny market share when you compare to the fact that most people say they want to buy sustainably.
Thank you.
How do you value competitors? UX, mimic, or reinvent? Not Joe, would you mind unmuting yourself and rephrasing that question?
Oh, hello. I was just thinking about shortcuts that are available to teams of little budget, and how much weight do you give to designing a good user journey for your audience in terms of providing them something that they expect to see, versus if you're providing something that's similar but could be going down a different road. Do you think it's safer and more economical to start by mimicking the layout and the journey path that they're already familiar with?
Yeah, I think it's important, and this is where the user journey mapping is so important. So you need, and especially if you're bringing some innovation, something that disrupts the way people behave, you need to understand how they behave first, where they spend their time, and just try to fit into that journey. Because if you're trying to take them somewhere where they don't want to go, you have to, I think it's about speaking the language of the people and fitting in their existing journey before you can totally disrupt them, basically. So hence the importance of mapping how people behave, of mapping, competition, and taking the best of everything to bring about your experience, and also to test it, basically.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Any other questions? Don't be shy. We have another 4 minutes or so.
I had a question I think you've half answered, which was you know, the connection between the customer experience and sustainability in itself. I mean, because this would apply to any business, whether it was sustainable or not, presumably. But I think you're talking about changing behaviour. Is that it?
Yeah, it's just that if we think that sustainability is enough to, you know, save the planet, basically, I think we're wrong, because we need to convince people to change beyond those early adopters, the eco warriors, you know, people that are probably on this call, and of friends and families, basically. So if we want to reach that scale and to mainstream sustainable options or regenerative solutions, we need to apply the same, you know, winning techniques that have helped, you know, Airbnbs, the deliverers and that kind of, you know, super successful businesses scale, so that those sustainable behavior solution investment, that they become the norm. And I think this is the key.
Thank you.
Yeah, sustainability is not enough, I'd say, to convince the masses, basically, I'd say. Well, that's my belief, at least. Yeah. Okay, if there's no other question, I think we're gonna be concluding this. And I actually, Liz, this is a good transition to my last slide, which is, you know, the Tron Horse metaphor, where basically I'm saying, you know, there's a war happening. We need to fight for a better future. So just consider that outstanding user experience will be your Tron Horse of your impact innovation, and that, you know, sustainability is kind of the cherry on the cake. And this, I think this is a much more efficient strategy for scaling, basically. I don't know if you agree, Liz.
Yeah, no, I do actually. I was going to say I'll touch base with you and we can have a chat separately, because it was quite an interesting conversation there.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. So we run those